In this episode, we discuss how the recent No Kings protests were so widespread, and also how they may reflect something deep inside the American psyche. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man whose deep, booming voice can knock you off your feet. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to hit him today with a love TKO?
Yeah, man. I don't even know where to go with that. So let's just have a show.
All right, so we're recording on October 28th, 2025. And Tunde, everybody knows about the October 18th, 2025 No Kings Day protests that brought out an estimated 7 million people across 2,700 events all around the country. And as the name suggests, these huge, and they were peaceful, these huge peaceful protests really focus on America's disdain for unchecked and concentrated power, i.e. a king, which has unchecked and concentrated power, and really harken back to the founding of the country, which was literally about the disdain for and the desire to overthrow King George in England, who had unchecked power. And to set up a system also where there would never be a king, so much work went into setting up a system where a king could not arise out of this. Now, the mindset still resonates clearly, with 7 million people taken to the streets. But one thing that was very interesting is that a recent Harvard study on this protest suggests that it may have been the most geographically widespread in U.S. history. So it's popping up everywhere. So Tunde, what are your thoughts, I guess, to start on the protests in general, but then also on the idea that it resonated so broadly from a geographical standpoint, all from sea to shining sea, so to speak?
Well, apparently you've been watching the fake news media because it was a Hate America rally that was paid for by George Soros. Because only he can afford to pay 7
million people to take to the street.
Yeah, I was going to say only he can afford to pay 7 million people like $1,000 each to show up, take off a day off work, and show up. So that apparently was the information.
But all of that efficiency and ability to move people doesn't pay off when it comes to voting, though, for whatever reason.
Yeah,
all that it's just for show.
Yeah. Obviously, there's something there, right? This many Americans coordinated together in 26 to 2,700 different locations around the country for a record turnout of 7 million people in one day to protest something. So I think it's notable. I think what I'm finding more interesting is just kind of the reactions to it, and I don't know. I think maybe the collective inability to make sense of everything that we've been through this year.
To me,
that's...
I found it to be very interesting because you and I have bemoaned the idea that people in leadership don't seem to want to keep separation of powers and due process. And I'm not just talking about the executive branch here, like the guy who wants to be king or who wants to be treated like a king, to be treated as if he's above the law and all this other stuff. But everybody else, like that stuff happens because the people in Congress decide like, I know we have all this power under the Constitution, but we'll just have you do what you want to do, Mr. Executive. Or the Supreme Court saying, executive branch, it's okay if you guys don't follow the law. We'll bless that. And so the other centers of power, if you have separation of powers, you have three centers of power. What's most interesting to me about all this is how the other two centers of power have been voluntarily, I don't know if that's the right word, but they have been eager to push their chips and their power over to the executive branch. That's been the trend, I guess. Not when Biden was in power, but they're eager to do this now. And so the thing that's very interesting to me about it is like, okay, so I thought that impetus was coming from the masses of Americans. I'm like, maybe Americans, generally speaking, don't have the same aversion to the idea of centralized power anymore, of unchecked power anymore, and the separation of powers is not something that they value anymore. This refutes that. This means, okay, so the American people are still into the idea of three separate branches of government, each having their own thing to do, and the other, and not stepping on each other, and so to speak, checks of power and all that. And it's for whatever reason, although the people are still into that, enough people in power have kind of departed from that and said, no, we're going to give all our power to this one guy. So that disconnect was very interesting to me because, like I said, I hadn't seen that, because this widespread stuff they're talking about, this is in red states, this is in blue states, this is across the board, where you have a lot of people saying, hey, no, we don't want a king. And I'm like, well, man, did their members of Congress get this memo? Because their members of Congress are like, yeah, go ahead, let's have a king. At least enough. A majority of the Congress are saying that. Yeah,
well, that's why I find the reaction to it so interesting. I mean, to your point about the Congress, right, the co-equal branch of Congress, you had Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, the leader in Congress right now, basically say that this, before the event, said that this was going to be a hate America campaign filled with Marxists and leftists. And yeah, I mean, first of all, I just find this allusion to Marxist comical at this point, because there doesn't seem to be anybody that really espouses that has any real power in the United States. But
nobody calls themselves that. Nobody's out here saying, we got to adopt more Marxist principles. It's an epithet. It's just like, that's just calling somebody a jerk or whatever. Because even the people that are hearing Marxists don't even know what the descriptive term of that. I mean, but remember that we've talked about that. Conservative doesn't mean anything other than I'm on this team. People that are conservative will be arguing for radical change half the time, but they call themselves conservative just to say what team they're on. And so him calling people Marxists is just to say somebody who's not on my team.
Yeah, and they can define it about as good as they can define the term woke. But
that's the benefit of it, is that you can define it how whatever. It doesn't have to apply factually. It's just a signal of not my team.
Yeah. And so the thing I'm getting at is that the co-equal branches that you discuss that are supposed to put a check on executive overreach, let's just say, and really all three branches checking each other, is the reason I bring up Mike Johnson is he's the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
He's one of the other centers of power.
That's my point. He's the one that his job is to protect the U.S. Constitution as a co-equal branch to the executive. And the point you just made is very accurate. For some reason, we have two of the three branches, meaning the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court on down, and the legislative branch, which is the Congress. They have kind of abdicated their positions in a lot of ways. Sometimes the Supreme Court may push back. A lot of times it doesn't. And Congress seems to have not pushed back at all. Not only
remember, the Supreme Court has this thing now where they take all of the Trump cases out of order, like they rush them to the front, and then whenever the brakes are put on what he wants to do, they take those brakes off and then say, okay, yeah, now we'll take our time to consider this over the next 3 or 4 years. Like they've handed over a lot of power, and the thing is that Trump's not the first president to try to exceed executive authority, but historically, when that's happened, the other branches of government, the idea of three branches of government and separation of powers, what that relies on is the idea that other people with power won't voluntarily give up their power. They'll be like, oh, no, you're stepping into my land here. This is my job. You don't get to do that. And so that kind of falls apart when the other people who have been granted that power start saying, oh, no, here, sir, have my power too. I know I'm the one that's supposed to be able to make tariffs and stuff, but why don't you have that policy or that power, Mr. President? Congress doesn't need it. And so it's kind of anti what we thought the human nature would be, what we being the founder of the United States, the founding fathers, like, oh, well, the people in Congress would never just voluntarily hand over all this power to consolidate it into the executive, because they'd want to hold on to it themselves.
Yeah, well, they didn't think about the pull of things like religious zeal and transactions.
They did think about that. They literally did think about that.
The transactions that some may make with others, right, for power. And also, I mean, look, you're right. Based on the amount of times we talk about George Washington's farewell address, they did recognize the risks of these kind of issues. But just to finish the thought about Mike Johnson is his sworn duty. He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And there's a great point you bring up about the tariffs, because the Constitution says that Congress regulates commerce. And what we have is a president who by decree has said, I'm doing tariffs. And the Congress has not said, no, sir, the Constitution doesn't say that. We need to debate this on the floor of Congress.
That's our job. Yeah. We'll get back to you on whether or not we'll do this or not. Like that's what they're supposed to do there.
And remember, on behalf of the American people, right? As a House of Representatives, right? So I think your point is well made where and that's why I kind of feel like I'm watching the reactions to it more. So like I get that 7 million Americans are upset with what they're seeing in terms of how the executive branch is, operating, right? And displaying its power and not being checked. But it's like I'm seeing just all the reactions from people. And I feel like part of it is our fractured ecosystem, because I talk to people too in my personal life that have all kind of opinions on it. And I kind of realize, well, your opinion seems to be based on what you were told, based on who you watched, versus actually that you actually looked at this stuff yourself. So
it's not really their opinion.
I just feel like it's a big mess for us to
hold on, Tunde. It's not really their opinion then, is it? It's something they were fed.
I know, you're right.
But no, I mean, I think that you're right, though. I mean,
that's why it's a mess.
The point of, and I mean, I think we get to the point of this, and I think this is why maybe it's starting to resonate with people, is that the reason why we did not want unchecked, unaccountable authority housed in with one person or one branch of government is because we didn't want national policy to be subject to the whims of a person or whims of a small group of people. And that's what we're seeing. Like we literally are seeing, we got trade policy now based on a whim. Like, oh, I saw, president that sees a commercial he doesn't like and he's going to change the trade policy for the whole nation. And it's like, well, that's not the setup was supposed to prevent. We don't want trade policy based on a whim. Dude, we got foreign policy based on a whim. Let me just say this. Let me finish the point. We have foreign policy based on a whim. Foreign policy, hey, we're going to just give $40 billion to this other country because I like the guy. And it's like, well, what? Like that's crazy. Like, and so when we see this national, of course, military policy is on a whim also, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to send against the law. I'm just going to send troops to American towns. Up until this point, we don't have troops in American towns. And then now it's like, okay, we got troops and all this other stuff going on. So we are basically operating on a man's whims. And that was the setup we weren't supposed to have. And I think that has rubbed people, regardless of whether you agree or disagree, and the people who disagree, obviously it's going to rub them the wrong way. But even people that agree are being made uncomfortable by the idea of the whimsical nature of governing and so forth. So I did want to get to the reaction, or, I know you already jumped on it a little bit, but was there any other points you had there? Because I had some thoughts on the reaction as well. But I was
just going to say that the point you made about we literally have announced a change in the trade policy with, I think, our third largest trading partner, which is Canada, because of a commercial. And I remember how many people told me last year in the election that a woman couldn't be president because she'd be too emotional. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's one of those where the conclusion was made before the reason. And then the reason just came for that, they just used the reason. They came up with the reason after the fact.
Yeah, apparently men aren't emotional. They don't make decisions off emotion. So,
But the thing I'll tell you though, man, and the reaction, the part of the reaction that stood out to me, like I didn't think there was much reaction from political figures. There was reaction from Mike Johnson. There was reaction from Donald Trump. But those guys are out there in the intent, trying to get attention, like they're trying to, but by and large, I didn't see a lot of people getting out, really trying to make a big deal about this. Like they seem to kind of just want to let this thing pass by and large. As far as elected officials, one person that really seemed to throw his weight behind it, though, that was very interesting to me was Joe Rogan. And where Rogan was really taking this position that that the people who were protesting were a joke or, not serious people, and getting out there saying, oh, these people are all funded by somebody. And none of this, not backing any of this stuff up. Like he seemed to like a personal affront to this stuff. Like it was really crazy to me how extreme of a reaction he had both before it happened and then after it happened, feeling the need to double down on all this stuff. And it really stood out like, yo, you know what? Actually, it's revealing to me because it's like, okay, Joe Rogan is an elitist. Like he's not, he like cosplays as a common man, but he's out here, millionaire, all this other stuff, thinking like, oh, what are these common people? Let me tell these common people how they should be doing things or what they should be thinking, or in anything that they do, it can't be organic. It has to be organized by another elitist like me, because this rabble can never organize themselves, or they don't have feelings other than what I give them, so it was really the disdain he showed for an organic getting together of Americans Like that's like the most pure American type stuff. Like, hey, we're going to gather together. We're going to have an issue with something. We're going to do it peacefully. And this guy's talking like he's coming straight out of Iran. The way he sounds like, oh yeah, these crazy people and this and that and this and that. It's like, yo, I made it clear it's not a common man. This is not an everyman. I mean, maybe he's subject easily manipulated. So that's a commonality of him. But in terms of the way he sees the world, he's an elitist.
Yeah, I think you just said it very well succinctly. There's no other way to kind of look at it. I mean, let's not forget on that show he was smoking a fat cigar that probably cost a pretty penny, and he's sitting there with his buddy. And you're right, they're sitting there as elitists. And I don't dislike Joe Rogan. I listen to his show, and I think he's got some good guests on, and I like him, right? Like, meaning as a consumer of him, I don't know him, but I find that when people like him, and I watch them, and there's others too. I'm not here to name everybody, right? But I do think you're right, James. There's a disconnect. I'm sure Rogan grew up like most American, kind of middle class. He worked hard. I remember he was in Fear Factor in the 90s and stuff. But somewhere, like you're saying, in the last generation or so, the last 20 years of his life, he got disconnected from stuff like this, like the First Amendment, and recognizing that that's exactly what was being practiced in this No Kings protest. Americans' freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom to redress the government of their grievances, also freedom of the press to cover it, right? And my issue with someone like Joe Rogan, which I find a lot of people in American culture now, both entertainers like him as well as people I know in my personal life, they have expressed with direct detail, and I'll name a few with Rogan. He's addressed the freedom of speech with things like Jimmy Kimmel, that he didn't like the way the president and the administration handled it. He doesn't like the way the Epstein files are being handled, which to me is a knock on Congress for not checking the executive and all that. Deportations, he doesn't like the lack of due process. And the use of the military, as you mentioned, both domestically and in foreign excursions, like with Venezuela now, without really announcing what's going on. And so there's a couple more. I won't go on for the sake of time. So my point is, he's expressed himself as Joe Rogan over this last 6-7 months, a lot of issues with the administration's overreach on civil rights of Americans. But yet, when faced with the opportunity to join in with other Americans who feel this way, he has to bash them. And I think that's the cognitive dissonance, James, that I'm seeing more and more, even with people in my personal life. They'll start saying, I don't like this over here. But when there's something like this protest, they also say that this stuff is being funded by George Soros and that they can't bring themselves to go against the God King. So,
well, but that goes back to, and I've said it a lot of times, and it's illustrated to me so often over and over again. A long time ago, before he was prosecuted, now he's being prosecuted for political reasons or retribution. That's another on the whim of the executive. Now people would have to get prosecuted, and he demands the Department of Justice prosecute people, figure out ways to prosecute people. But that's a new thing, or another new thing now that we got. But
weaponized DOJ.
Yeah. Well, imagine I would think people would have complained about that, and they have, but now it's okay, apparently, to those people that used to complain about that. But when you have, what I'm talking about, James Comey, what he said, and this is when he resisted the efforts and during the first term of Donald Trump wanted him to swear personal loyalty to him. And Comey was like, well, no, and then Comey was very insightful, though, in terms of what was going on. And what he saw going on around him is, what he said, this is his quote. He said, Donald Trump eats your soul. And what it is that he forces you to make small compromises on what you thought your principles were over and over and over and over again. And at each little small compromise ends up taken away from your ability to ultimately stand up to when he keeps pushing it over and over again. You end up in a place where you'll just accept anything he does at a certain point, because it's just like, I've already made all these other compromises. I'm already so far committed to this guy that I've let this slip. I've let this slip. I've let this slip. I've let this slip. Even though I said I cared about all this other stuff before. I said I cared about people trying to weaponize the DOJ, but now I don't. Now that he's doing it, I don't care anymore. And it's because of the way he constantly forces people to make small compromises on what they say they believe in. And what you say you believe in is very important. Not things you don't care about. Like, I care about people, being honest. Well, he forces you to make compromises with that. Like, everybody has to be honest but him. Or I'll make excuses when he's not doing it. And so that's what you see there, basically, is that he's been able to will his way into these people's minds to where they can't bring themselves to, no matter what he does, no matter if they agree with it or don't agree with what he does, to go against him. And anybody who does then instantly, because that reminds them that they can't do it. That lets them know, like, yeah, I couldn't imagine doing that. So they have disdain for the people that actually didn't have their souls eaten, that are able to say, no, I don't like this. And so it's amazing to see, and again, I only can see it this way because I saw it when he said this back, 8 years ago or whatever it was. And then I've seen it happen so many times to so many different people where they start out in one place, and look at JD Vance. JD Vance started out in one place, like, oh, what Trump is doing is terrible. Like if you go look at some of the quotes from JD Vance from years back, as far as how bad Donald Trump would be for this country, you'd be amazed that he's defending everything he does now. But that's exactly the progression you see once these people, once they take a bite, basically, of that apple that Trump offers.
So hold on. You messed me up because I got to say a joke with JD Vance. Dude, well, let's go back to his starting. The freaking starting is the guy was, I guess a pluralistic enough person that he found himself able to marry an Indian American woman and also lean into being open about, I wouldn't say he hasn't converted to Hinduism, but he's been open about, having his kids raised with the Hindu influence and going to, I've seen pictures of him on X where he's with the Indian family all in the kind of traditional Indian garb. And I'm fine with that. I think that's great. And then I see him last week after the group chat of the Republican Nazis, and he's sitting there defending white supremacists when he's got 3 brown kids. So you're talking about people making a leap. Where he started in his personal life to where he is now as a professional is a huge leap. Which, how.
But I was just saying where he started politically and the criticisms he used to level at Trump.
No, but I'm just saying about it must be also a type of personality trait for someone to be able to go this far. He must be a magician on how he keeps his wife, happy that he can behave like this in public and somehow not be like this.
I think once, what it seems to me, at least, it seems like once people start going down the path, they can't stop. And so really the decision is, because it's not the never Trumpers, so to speak, that you saw with this issue. The never Trumpers, they kind of just got out immediately and they didn't have the issue. But the people who weren't seem to continue, like they started in one place where they were like, oh, this guy's bad news. He's deceptive. He's a liar. He's, this and that. And then they, like, if they didn't get out though, if they said, all right, but if he's the nominee, we'll do it. Then what ends up happening is that they go from warning us all about how terrible it was going to be if this guy got into power to being the main ones defending him. And so, it seems like once you start making those, and that's why I say, like, it's eating your soul. It's like, it's slow. It's like he forces you to make these compromises. Like, remember we laughed about when he did the thing with the hurricane map, and he drew and like, they had the hurricane map and he had said, oh, well, it was going to go to Alabama, and that the hurricane map didn't show that. So he got a hurricane map and drew the path of the hurricane was in white lines. He drew in a black line, in a little extra little loop to make it look like it went to Alabama. It wasn't even in the same color of line. So it was clearly doctored. But it's like, all right, now I did that. Now you believe it. So it's challenging. It's like, yo, you can see this BS, but you are going to have to eat it because I own you. And that's what he does to people.
The hurricane was supposed to go that direction.
Huh?
I said the hurricane was supposed to go that direction. Remember? It didn't listen.
By decree. That was what it was.
It was an executive order to the hurricane. But it wasn't
like they took like an AI image and doctored the map so you couldn't tell the difference. They made it very clear and very apparent that this thing had been done, that the line that went into Alabama was not the same color as the line that went into the rest that was the rest of the track for the hurricane. It was like, yo, they're not even trying to fool people here. This is a loyalty test,
No, it's great. It's all psychology. It's interesting. Just watching everyone else go crazy.
So what do you make of the disconnect then? The disconnect that we have where you have people in leadership who seem to be more than willing to hand over power as much as they can to the executive branch with every demand. Hey, I want to be able to do this. Okay, I want to be able to do that, and they just hand over more and more power to the guy. And this is in opposition to the way that the country is set up. Like, interestingly enough, the way the country was set up assumed that the people in these other branches of government would try to hold on to their power. But in this case, we have people getting power and then voluntarily trying to give it to this other guy. That disconnect that you see in leadership versus the disdain the people still have for that. Like, what do you make of that disconnect? Like, how is that able to exist?
Yeah, so I think, obviously not all the people have a disdain for it. I mean, we know that a lot do, but there's enough that are able to keep the people in power propped up, right? Like through votes and things like that. And so I think we're seeing a lot of things, James. I think you've got several issues. I think some of it is maybe like we just talked about the vice president. Maybe some of it is just the proximity to power. That once you get a little bit in and you start tasting it, it's like, oh yeah,
you want to give it away.
Once
you get a little in and you start tasting it, it's like, oh yeah, here, bro.
Yeah, you can't give it away. But that's the thing. Like, I'm going to keep going down this road because this is too good. Like, some people are like that, right? They get open or they go through certain doors and they just can't go back. And so I think
usually,
that's part
though,
of it. But
once you get a taste of power, you want more of it. Not that you want to have less and you want to give it to somebody else. So I'm not disagreeing with you in the abstract. I'm just saying, like, it sounds kind of crazy the way you're saying that.
Well, hold on. Let me preface that then, because this could be a greater set of comments than I was intending to, but because it's also about the person in that position, like JD Vance, and I'm not sure to go psychoanalyze everybody, right? But there's a lot of people that themselves may not have the confidence for them to be in the top of the pyramid and directing and driving everyone else, but they're willing to follow someone who can get them to a certain level of a position of power, or someone like a young vice president to an older president who, just is old enough that we can say he's got health problems and stuff like that.
Well, but the vice president is the worst example, though, because he doesn't have any power. We're talking about
what I'm saying is
power.
He's going into a door. That's why I don't want to make this about him specifically, but I'm just saying he's a young vice president. By him putting up with this for a little bit of time, there's a chance he could become president. So that's all. That's a little bit different.
But Mike Johnson, that is. Like,
so here's where I'll go with him on my thought. I think that there's a lot of transactional people in life in general, but right now in our power structure. So I would say this: Mike Johnson also strikes me as someone himself that doesn't look like he's trying to run everything. But Mike Johnson, I'm going to say this in a very, I'm going to say careful way. Hopefully it comes out of my mouth the way it's in my head. Mike Johnson is an example of a certain section of American people that, in my opinion, they hate America themselves. So they keep projecting on everyone else. When he said that it's going to be a Hate America rally, I think that's a projection. He hates what America is right now.
And wants to make it something else. He wants to make it something else than what it is right
Correct. In his mind, America should be something else. I think he hates that First Amendment.
It should be a hierarchical nation.
I think he doesn't like in the First Amendment that the Congress should not legislate a religion. I think that he is an example of someone who is making a transaction, whether it's overt or just in his mind, meaning overt like him and the president have talked. But I think that he's going to allow the president to do certain things and to abuse and use power and wield it a certain way in exchange for a promise that this can become a theocracy one day or something close to it, like what's happened in Oklahoma and Texas, where they're putting the 10 Commandments in public schools, right? Like, so these are things that maybe another administration through the DOJ or others would have been suing the state of Texas and the state of Oklahoma for this. This DOJ is not.
Yeah, these things would have been. Yeah. It's not the first time they tried to do that stuff, but we know that
So that's what I'm saying is that this could be the type of transaction where the president is winking to the Speaker of the House, saying, "Hey, man, just let me do this one over here. Let me use the military this way. Don't check me on this over here. But we're going to make sure that these plans you have in these state legislatures and the school systems and all that, we're not going to stop you from making this."
No, I think you're onto something there. In the sense that it's like these people, apparently, many of them would rather be on the team of absolute power than having a realm of power on their own, and saying, okay, I'll be able to control, or I'll have a big role in, one of the three branches of government that has power. Like, as opposed to that, it seems like they're like, well, let's throw all our power to this one guy and then we'll be on that team, and then we can get some benefit from that. I mean, unfortunately, and I'm not an overly religious guy, I have my spirituality and stuff, but that sounds a lot about us, a lot like what they used to talk about when it's like making deals with the devil. I'm going to give up my
Faustian bargain
and exchange for this promise or this and that. But I'm not going to go down that any further. But I will note that this is kind of a structural issue that we've run into, I think, because I think that the fundraising requirements, the way that people acquire power in the United States within the need for constant fundraising and all that actually makes them less principled and more transactional. Like, you can't really be a very principled person in many cases and also be a good fundraiser, because you're out here trying to get money from all these different types of people. Like, I guess the only one principle that you can have and still fundraise well is that big business is good. Like that, you can fundraise on that principle. But a lot of other principles will have people that is like, oh, well, if you're that, then if you put that above this check that I'm giving you, then I'm not giving you the check, And so, but the thing I would say also that contributes to this is, I think this is, when we've talked about the book, directly, but this is amusing ourselves to death, because this is an example of a level of focus and seriousness from the American people, like about a serious issue that I don't know that can be sustained in a modern kind of environment, and because with amusing ourselves to death, it's kind of like this mindset that as the society, and this goes into, like with the proliferation of video and so forth, it changes the way we process information. It changes the kind of information that rise to the top and that we get, and then how we actually internalize it and so forth. And the great example he gave was like, well, a lot of people are fearful of the Orwell type of takeover, but he was like, really a Huxleyan type of Brave New World takeover is much more of a concern. That was one of the premises in amusing ourselves to death, because people will be distracted. People will be, they'll be so caught up in their distractions that as serious things are happening and society has changed or society is upended, they won't be able to maintain focus on the serious issues long enough to actually deal with them. So I think there's some of that too. Like, yes, people can get together and be like, hey, this is unacceptable. We kind of saw what's been going on, but can they sustain that energy for any period of time before it's like, oh, look, a bird. Oh, look, a video here. Oh, look, this celebrity got married. And, because that stuff's not just I have to go to the grocery store and see it. That stuff's on my pocket buzzing all the time. And that stuff is going to just pull my attention away and make it hard to stay looking at and maintain kind of an energy towards something like this.
Yeah.
Anything before we close up?
I'll just finish with this, that I think it's probably going to be even deeper than that, unfortunately, because I think what we're dealing with, and I think a lot of people in our elected officials, meaning in Congress and Senate, are susceptible to this, is people have become radicalized. Because I can also think that if you've been, like you said, the medium of how we receive information now is mostly videos and certain things. I saw a guy just yesterday on YouTube who I subscribe to. He's an interesting ex-military guy. And he had this doctored video that was showing these hordes of black people, like literally like hundreds of people, like rushing into a Walmart. And he was saying that this is happening now in Tampa, Florida, because of people, because of the president not, or something with the food, right? The government shut down and people don't have food to eat. And I thought, man, how dangerous is this? I could tell that was a doctored up video, but some people will believe it, right? And it'll make them scared.
Especially if that's something that they would like to believe, something in them wants to believe. Like that's kind of the
confirmation.
That's that confirmation bias thing that you got to.
Yeah. So then that's where I feel like when we're talking, I'll specifically name the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, again. I again, not in his head, but there's other people in Congress that, again, because they've been radicalized and they believe these things like that they're being replaced and all these threats to them, I think they're also more willing to make these kind of like deals with the devil, Faustian bargains, and saying to the executive, kind of like that whole thing, I need a strong man. You just fix this. All these hordes of people coming over the border and all that. And I think
we can't solve this with debate. Kind of thing.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. It's too far gone now. We need a strong man to just come in here and clean all this up. And that's obviously how he got elected. And I think what some of the anxiety we're seeing, like the No Kings Parade, is a reflection that more Americans are waking up and saying, what I'm seeing, I don't know if we shouldn't be debating some of this stuff, right? Like this may not be what we thought we signed up for. And people like you and I can say, yeah, we read Project 2025. This is exactly what the country signed up for when they elected this guy, but a lot of people weren't paying attention. and we all got to live through this now. So
yeah. I mean, I think that's well put. So I think we can wrap from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.